Next I'll show you the files that are used in conjunction with the database. Here's the actual database itself, Attendance DB 2010-11 version 516.mde. That's the Microsoft Access database. As well, when you open a Microsoft Access database, it creates an LDB, or a locking file. It's very small, and when you close the file, it disappears. As well, we have the data files that I'll explain later how they're created and then imported. Parent mailing labels CSV, periods absent CSV, and student directory.csv. As well, up here we have the mail merge source documents. Now I recommend that you create a folder called something such as 2010-11 attendance and place all of these files in that folder and keep only those files in that folder. Now when you attempt to open this database for the very first time on your computer, you might be prompted. It might ask you, do you want to block harmful expressions? Of course you'd answer yes, and then it would reset and then tell you that you need to reopen the database. It would close and ask you to reopen. Then on each subsequent time, I'll just close the database, when you reopen it, you're prompted with a security warning. Then you can click open, and in you are. Now something important to point out, because attendance data changes every day, it's important that whenever you use this database to perform step 1 every day, meaning perform the steps to extract the data and save it, and then here in step 1, import it. It isn't as important to do step 2 and 3 because the data there does not change as dramatically. Now there's another key point to tell you about. On the Creating Saving Instructions tab here on step 1, I suggest that you actually print to paper the first page of the absence report. Then come back here, once you've imported it, and click on one of these reports and find some of those students and verify that the information that's on that report is exactly the same as is reflected on our reports within the database to ensure that process happened correctly. Now on the Initialize School Values tab is a button here that has to do with 18-year-olds. Now when I developed this application, the presumption was that 18-year-old students would not receive letters, generally speaking. So that is the default that I've put in here. If this is checked, when the criteria is used to generate letters, 18-year-olds will be ignored. If in fact you do wish 18-year-olds to be considered the same as all other students, then you would simply uncheck that box and carry on all of the steps as normal. Now over here on the Letter 1 tab are a number of extra functions that you may never need, but I'm going to explain why you might need them. This one here, open form to be able to remove letter 1 sent date. Let's suppose those letters that we sent last week, you had them all ready to go, and at the very last minute they were in the envelope, but oh, this one right here we didn't actually send. So we click on that field and delete that date, and then when we look at any reports in the future, that will not be indicated that a letter was sent to that person. Another one, suppose, we're going to deselect everything here, suppose that you want to send 3 or 4 letters to specific students for some reason separate from the usual routine. Well, I could identify those here, then go see those 4 students and continue through and do all the steps that I did in the first place for letter 1, including the mail merge and some mailing labels. Now the last function here is to manually enter a date that a letter was sent. This might be if, who knows, perhaps you sent a letter, you scribbled out a letter, you typed up a letter and you sent it separate from this, but you want it reflected in your database because you just like things to be orderly. So it could be that on November 10th I sent some type of letter to this student. I could simply go to that field and type it there, and then when I look at any other reports in the future, something would be indicated that a letter was sent on November 10th. Again, some of these overkill, but they're there. Now maybe we sent a letter at 9 absences, and maybe now you think it's time a few weeks later to send another batch of letters. So we go to the Letter 2 tab and perform exactly the same steps. It might be November 30th now. We key that, we click on the number of absences, might be 15 or 16 or who knows what, go through all the same steps, the mail merge, etc., the labels, etc. We'd use our second mail merge document that is worded probably different from our first mail merge document, and carry out the same steps, and then later when we look at all of our reports we would see that yes, in fact, a letter was sent to some students possibly on that first date, November 7th, and then again on November 30th in some cases. Now in developing this, I tried to put as much flexibility in as possible. Over here on the Exclude Include Students tab are a couple of functions that I'll try to explain why they're here, and probably you'll never use them. The rationale for the first one over here, the Exclude. It could be that there are a few students in the school who you simply never want to send a letter to. Now you could say, every time I generate letters, I'll just remember to not send them a letter, and that'll work just fine. The other option is, come here, click on this button, and go and identify those students. By checking there, I can see that those are the ones I have, and when the logic runs, when you're generating letters, it will ignore those students and never generate a letter for them. Fine. The other one, this Include, on the right side. Suppose we are generally not sending letters to 18-year-olds. It could be that there are a few 18-year-olds who have signed disclosure forms and in fact, in the normal course of things, should be treated the same as a 16 or 17-year-old. If they meet the criteria, a letter should be generated. Well, this allows you to go in and identify those students that have signed disclosure forms, if you like, and then when you generate letters, if they happen to have the right number of absences, be it 15 or whatever, they will be included and a letter will be generated. Perhaps never used, but there they are. Alright, I'll do my best to explain the need for this function here. Let's suppose yesterday was November 4th and you were working through all of this data and doing a variety of things and you generated reports, and now it's the morning and it's November 5th and you don't wish to go back and get new data because your group was meeting talking about yesterday's data. But you would like the reports to reflect November 4th when there were 40 days expired rather than now when in fact 41 days have expired. So this allows you to go in here and change the effective date back to November 4th. Then when you look at reports, it'll be the same date as you had yesterday, but it will also have 40 and reflected as of November 4th. Fussy, 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 but at least it does provide you that ability to do that. Now there is a Help tab, and among other things, it indicates that some documentation can be found at the website NestorenkoSoftware.com, which also has these videos.